Emily walked alone through the dark alleys of the city, believing that members of the Moonstone had shoved her and the others into where the level sea monsters dwelled, where, unless for that fortunate individual she had encountered, she would surely not be here walking around the city today. It was also nice that she could get crystals where currently they are supposed to be concealed. Where to sell them at this time may guide her trail. Then, the exact same business card which that strange individual with the monster offered her dropped out of the girl's purse. Emily then recalled the way he indicated the positive qualities of her ability, but having taken her burden, Emily went on thinking that she was not necessary to rush to the first one who appreciated her talent. The Viking Tower was a world of mystery that was equipped with an S level of the first generation hunters. Roy Lawrence long ago found this world and attempted to conquer it, but since then, communication with him has been lost, and he is still considered missing. After him, a lot of hunters attempted to conquer this world, but all of them were not blessed with the most enviable destiny, where they were killed at its very first level. There was only one single individual who could come back from the ground, the famous Casper Fields. Narrating all this, Blake continued that it was at this location his sister and her crew got stuck. Martin was amazed at where his hunter would lead him, and Josh himself inquired about what getting stuck meant, to which the guy elaborated that in that world there is a structure that is dissimilar, such that it has an entrance but lacks an exit. The young man was astonished at such information about this already apparently weird location, and Blake went on claiming that you can escape there either by proceeding all over the whole world or via teleportation, where, in this scenario, the cloning ability is a blessing. Now, the agent and Josh know why the cloning ability is needed, because in case of death, the clone will just be lost, which means it can try to reach there multiple times where no human survives. But then, the guy did make sense regarding why the group had not received scrolls for teleportation. With this question, the young man nailed the bullseye, where his reply was that the group had well stocked with everything that was required. And therefore, resting against his chair, the head of the Saphiro addressed his addressees. Now, he was going to reveal to them all which occurred. He started from the time in which about 5 years elapsed since the initial global catastrophe related to the monster's invasion. At that moment, he was extremely young, just starting his long path as a hunter. Blake's little sister went closer to the boy and offered him a light meal. In this moment, he inclined towards the girl, beginning to relate how she should not have ventured into perilous areas, when suddenly some sort of portal materialized on their side. But as it would later turn out, it wasn't a portal but an entrance to an enclosed area that his sister had constructed. Blake inquired from the girl how she was able to do it, to which the girl happily said that this thing showed up on its own, and now she is able to stash a lot of things in there. After having petted his little sister, the young man instructed her to gobble up herself, and also observed that the girl had developed an amazing basic skill. Observing that the girl was most probably very exhausted, Blake had hinted that they return home and take it easy. As they strolled along, Susan inquired when Colin would be returning, to which her brother demonstrated that in a couple of 20 days later. Because of this incredible talent of Susan, the sister and brother were able to eschew all various hazards by secluding in this secret room, wherein you could place whatever your heart wished. There, observing his sister progress and advance, the man progressively started developing the perception that her talent was perfect for hunting within the worlds. Clueless regarding anything, the man suddenly hit him a good blow on the head, where Susan asked her brother why he suddenly lost his temper. Everyone who was present in the same room was actually shocked by the way the head of the association had just received a good hit at the back of the head from the girl, but Blake did not care about the move of his sister, where he cared about the fact that the group required a person with the power of teleportation for protection. But for this, The girl replied that there would not be even 100 of such people in the entire world, and thus just scrolls would suffice. Also, reminding her brother of his special talent, Susan told him to keep faith with her. A girl who just stood by listening overheard that the head of the association's sister certainly possessed more strength. Some men believed that they could not defend the boss's sister, but she said by retorting that even if they themselves had to be guarded, only the head of the Sapphires himself paid heed to the matter, as if he had a premonition that all this could not go so well. But Susan vowed to send the group if it ever got hazardous. She also emphasized that she is quite well aware of the moment when individuals close and around her heart do not come back, after which the girl snapped fingers abruptly, pledging that they had at their disposal not only teleportation scrolls, but plenty of provisions in her own space. Blake elucidated he should not have been content with the fact that the group had quite a lot of provisions with them in case of unexpected happenings. The girl sitting on the other side continued that planning used much energy and time, and thus it would be unjust to the group to call off the outing. She also added that the man is too protective of his sister, where she is a mature girl who can decide in delicate situations. After hearing such reasons, Blake continued that since the expedition had already begun, all that was left was to have trust in those who were engaged in it. Then the assistant of the head of the association, Bob, peeped into the office and knew that it was the time for them to leave. When the girl inquired about the type of meeting that he had, the man said he doesn't take any appointment. It's merely his time to serve as the host for the awakening ceremony, and which will be done today. When Josh heard what was being said, he immediately realized that it was at this ceremony that he activated his talent. It was an intriguing coincidence, though. The young man went on to explain that prior to this, he had a much bigger waist. Then Martin went into the room and requested if they had phoned the group. Blake elaborated that there was a deal of utilizing communication by telepathy scrolls, wherein they were allowed to utilize them only when they were standing right in front of the portal. The first communication session went well, as was the second and third, and finally the group leader also relaxed that all was well. A month had already lapsed since the beginning of the expedition, where Blake's assistant gave the command for preparing another telepathy scroll roll, and accordingly, one of the laborers prepared the paper and, counting from 3 to 0, ripped it. At that very same instant, a telepathic bridge appeared between their camp tent and where the group was, and now the man in front of the screens was already discussing the problem of how he was getting a report from the group that they had marched another 700 m but were attacked by some unknown monsters with whom they were fighting where they hurt. But then, all of a sudden, the telepath signal became intolerable for the person who had used the scroll, where he started screaming that his head would be literally torn to pieces. Blake immediately realized that such a thing would only be occurring because of the ripping of a number of scrolls simultaneously. But suddenly, at the back of the head of the Sapphires, a portal started opening. Everybody was amazed by what was happening, because something terrible had indeed occurred to the group, because the teleportation scroll had been activated, where it may be a stupid decision of one single team member to rescue himself and abandon the others there. And then one among the members of the group emerged out of the interspatial corridor which had opened, and the man stood up and moved forward to wait outside the portal for the remaining members of the group to come out of it. But the portal started closing, and Blake, embracing the fatigued, wounded young man in his arms, instructed to call for a team of doctors right away. While waiting for assistance, he was horrified to see the sole road to his dear sister disappear into thin air. Here, Blake's aide exercised her powers, invoking the one in charge of the telepathic link. The girl inquired if the channel was still stable, and when the man assured her of the presence of a connection, the woman told to inform the group that they congregated in Susan's room and made periodic contact until the rescue team, and the sole member of the group who escaped surreptitiously requested forgiveness, explaining that the mission had failed and monsters the likes of which never existed before devastated all the scrolls. Doctors treated the injured man who, without delay, explained that the injury was extremely serious, and the man was taken to the hospital immediately. When the young man was being led off, Blake sat for a while and looked at the pool of blood he had dropped behind, but his attention was interrupted by the figure behind the telepathic link stating that there was a message for the man. He explained that now he would only pass on everything that they had instructed him. The message was delivered through Susan, who apologized to her brother for the mission failure. The girl also verified that they had the option to wait, and thus called her brother not to make rash decisions. The girl's last statement before the connection with the outside world was severed were that she definitely came back since she vowed to finish telling his story. Blake revealed that he attempted to hire lots of hunters on a rescue mission, but none of them complied. All of them said no the instant they heard of the Viking Tower, and that the crew ended up stranded there, although they had teleportation scrolls with them. Some of the hunters posed concern that they would not be capable of bringing their pets over here, which would die if they moved a certain distance. Well, then there was some breakthrough where the encounter between the Sapphire's leader and Josh occurred. Now that the young man realized why this man treated him so cruelly, because he had to acquire certain characteristics in order to reach where the gang was, and Blake said that the preparations were in place, and now the rescue operation could proceed. A waiter walked by one of the rooms and was awfully scared by the subdued sounds of blows and cursing there, and then the same gang that's leader who possessed one of the hunting grounds acquired another heavy face punch, where the boss who unleashed his wrath upon his inferior drenched him with worst insults, and told him that he did not request anything supernatural from all the rest of them too, who also succeeded in receiving it. From the boss rose up and heard his words that they were undeserving of anything. The leader of Moonstone, Elmer Maddox, did not believe anyone to steal so effortlessly all of Power Crystal's stock. Having sat down and crossed his legs, the bad man shouted for the one who dared to rob his laboratory, to which the junior who had come said that they were all masked, but the masked one was low level. The boss would not believe that an entire team of DL hunters could be defeated by someone who has only an E level. In anger, Odd stood up and gave a strong kick to the speaker and said that they were not alone who converted power crystals to focus. Kept punching the fellow, the man bellowed that if they didn't chart the supply, then somebody else will, and then they won't be capable of turning permanent suppliers. After finishing kicking his subordinate, Elmer instructed to look for him, this man, at any expense and bring back the merchandise, and thus the henchman, disabled by the boss, hurried as soon as possible to complete the mission. Elmer himself went back to his residence, believing that all these hunters will once more be defeated, because this already happened in trying to determine where else he can find time to acquire power crystals so the transaction can be completed. The man literally pulled his head with his hands, but glancing at the fellow who had been seated in the shadows, the head of Moonstone informed Peter that, as things appeared, it would be impossible to conduct without his involvement, where the obviously jubilant young fellow willingly agreed to certainly discover all by his usual means. Back in the office of the agency, Josh noticed that Blake probably spoke the truth, but he certainly did not say all. And to Martin's question, the young fellow described the fellow did not say the reasons why they changed their minds, suddenly attempt to pass through the Viking Tower, where, of course, he understands nothing about the hunting world, but everybody understands that the Viking Tower was discovered a long time ago after all. Then, Casper Fields informed everybody that this world was discovered by him, where he informed that that world is vacant. There are no treasures or relics there, and only monsters inhabit there, and recommended that nobody go to this world if their life is valuable to them. It was after that all the best hunters lost interest in that world, but Blake remained silent. Why he was interested when questioned by the agent as to whether he would need to know information about this issue, the young man replied negatively that his mission now is to rescue the team and not discover the world. Martin started saying, how he could change his mind on this issue at any moment when a man caught his attention, suddenly sitting next to him. It was a very young girl who had managed to take a nap while waiting anxiously. When the agent questioned if the young man knew her, Josh clarified that he had met Emily on the search grounds, awarding her the business card of the agency. Martin asked very softly if she was okay, opening her eyes and not apparently expecting a view of a man's face so close to her. The girl lurched back. It was like she didn't completely realize where she was and what was happening here. Greeting Emily's wide-eyed stare, Josh and Martin looked on at her with no less surprised eyes. And then, in an effort to break some tension, the head of the agency proposed that everyone go into a nearby cafe and begin by having a good snack. Emily was scooping the spoon at lightning pace, pushing all on the plate into her stomach. Josh could not believe how hungry the girl was, and Martin encouraged her to eat slowly. Once Emily attempted to speak to the guy, but only moans from her stuffed mouth. After encouraging her to chew and swallow first food, the young man also tried to insinuate that she had made up her mind Ed to take his job offer. And when flushing Emily affirming the guy's suspicion, the agent posed a question to her regarding her field of expertise, and she clarified that her underlying skills are objectifying and preparing various kinds of potions, to which Josh jokingly added that after consuming such potions, all that remains is to just go and get some space at the cemetery, which totally enraged the girl, who aggressively mentioned that she had some potions that didn't kill. Well, the guy tousled by the hair added that even though the deadly result, the potion's produce has a fantastic effect, which he would love to introduce into his job, after which Josh, responding to the agent's question, asked, Nearly Whisper stated that he would like to use the potions on the clones, and today he has already sent the man out to get all the things needed for the chemistry laboratory in which he is ready to invest financially. Then, wishing Emily and Martine bon ayate, the young man responded that he was doing his business. The girl asked the guy he was visiting this time, to which he promptly answered that he was going to the next world, where the young man promptly described that his intention this time was not to hunt monsters. And a moment later, his interlocutor took out of her pocket and hurled to her savior some flasks of potions, one in order to make one powerful, the other to help mana. And when queried about side effects, Emily described that a strength potion melts your muscles and a mana potion blows up the body. After studying all the information regarding potions, Josh thanked his new girlfriend. Heading towards the crowd of his clones, the young man ordered them to march behind him. The manager of the Hunters Association, Lisa, informed her that she would be arriving soon at the warehouse and would be able to drop off all of the crystals at the location provided by the members of the Sapphire Association. The girl vowed to call the head of her association upon completing the task. Continuing further, she viewed the dead body of the section of their base, which contained the power crystals, where straight away following this, Emma discovered that their base had been raided, as can be testified to by the gigantic hole in the wall which contained the storage. Found attempting to figure out who was brave enough to attack their union, the girl had already engaged one of her abilities, covering the indoor space. She immediately found the targets, crying that she could easily see where the assailants were. Emma rushed indoors, but then something unknown stopped her from proceeding. Having the girl wrapped around her neck, she was absolutely certain that she could only find targets indoors. And when the manager attempted to ask for what was brave enough to attack their association, she received a firm slap on the back of the head immediately, where Peter, emerging from the void, gleefully pointed out her ignorance in that she actually expected to be provided with an answer to what she queried. Seeing Emma fall on the ground unconscious, the young man apologized for saying that they needed such power crystals more than their union. And now, already inside the warehouse, Peter disappears, safeguarding the process of gathering loot. And when the last stone was pulled out, the gang from the Moonstones, destroying remains, set fire to the vacant room. Observing the fire burning a light, Peter realized that the original problem with the stones for the exchange had already been solved. Everything else was to identify who had stolen their reserves. One of the Sapphire Association's planes had already taken to the air over the borders of Iceland, and as it approached the desired square, the pilots descended. Observing the hatch open, Josh realized that for the first time in his life, he was overseas with his clones. The young man walked towards the gateway that led him to the Viking Tower. The men who met the guy informed the guy that Mr. Cedars was beckoning him and welcomed him in, and so the young man and all his copies marched straight into the blackness of this infernal rift in space. Once inside the portal, Josh was totally amazed at the wacky shape of it, where he appeared to be suspended between the rocks and the far-off endless space which had nothing whatsoever to do with the very definition of the tower. When the motion was done, the young man noticed that the weather conditions here were entirely not acceptable. Meanwhile, Blake and his workers who were in the tent were talking about what had just occurred to the Fox's unification stones. They were interrupted by Josh entering the tent. The man and woman were delighted to see this person member of the rescue party. All the others who were around did not have the slightest idea why the head of the association had pinned such big hopes on this ordinary fellow. Well, meanwhile, Josh himself, like all his clones, was equipped with warm clothing, and so the first part began, where on a map drawn off the report of the group, Blake located the place the group's problem started out, which was about 40 kilometers from where the portal was to be mentally cast. Observing that the distance was not quite long enough to walk for a month, the young fellow continued to say that he had anticipated walking for longer. Meanwhile, the leader of the Sapphires passed 3 teleportation scrolls to Josh with the proposal that they be divided among the clones just in case. The luxury of carrying the scrolls would fall to numbers 4, 5, and 6, to whom the owner informed them that these scrolls are extremely valuable and have to be kept safe at any cost. And on inquiring from him as to how to use them, Blake informed that the place is already indicated where you just need to rip the paper. The man's assistant continued saying that the young man would quite easily locate the correct point without any trouble. Tracing the marks of battle, making the last preparations, Blake inquired from the guy whether he had any questions left. After pausing for a moment, Josh inquired from the man what he was having for dinner with his sister today when he got her back. Blake was anticipating any question except what his ears had just heard. Smiling a little, he said he would give his little sister some home food. Apart from the teleportation scrolls, Josh also equipped his clones with the cursed sword and potions he had gotten from Emily, and thus his clones came and reported their readiness and instantly got the approval to go on. Fairly soon, they all stood before a portal with a peculiar structure unlike other portals. Josh himself built himself leaning upon one of the chairs that he should be leaving in concentration and generating energy. The young man begun the unifying power. Blake witnessed as the young man used his power in his mind, concluding that now it was all up to this guy. Even at the portal's exit, the young man grasped that the unifying power worked just perfectly. The instant the clone he was paired with was on the other side, the young man could feel at once a squally, bone-piercing wind. Marching in that realm, the whole world where his clones existed was a huge snow-covered area. And so, Josh, having taken the form of a clone, declared to others that they were at this place called the Viking Tower. Somewhere, having sensed something odd, the young man compelled the clone to curl and uncurl fingers repeatedly, and the system reported the owner that at this growth level, he does not only sense the feelings of the individual with whom he is united, but even possesses the capability to move his body. Thus, it was like Josh himself was in this world in a new body, and now already told the others to go out and look for the group. The fellow also realized that instead of a portal, there was an ice block at his back, which made it impossible to go back from this world. With having written a report on about the monsters that the group had been able to get to meet along the journey, the young fellow decided to know whom they would have to meet first. but before he could read up to the end that these would be ice bats, the enemy already appeared, and now the clones were already dispatching these flying beasts, which were given level E one by one. A of local monsters was that every subspecies had a different type of person who, like a boss, wound up being one level above everyone else. Considering, of course, that level D was no match for him, Josh, in a clone body, started to unholster his weapon, where the rest of the clones hastily ran to his aid. Having already fought against weaker foes, the battle was short, and the victors pressed on their path in search for the stranded group. An ice bat was cut in two, where Josh observed that even though all of this is annoyance, it is really frustrating and one gets drawn back. After having asked one of the clones how far along they had gotten so far, the leader of the rescue team got the number 13 in reply. Observing that this was roughly a third of the way, the young man recalled that somewhere in the vicinity, a new type of monster would emerge, and that the advent of such was not long in arriving. Where observing the snowmen with clubs, Josh realized that he only needed to recall this training for the next battle. The young man turned on the energy of a charged bullet with mana, and thus he commanded the clones to scatter, where 3 moved forward from behind, 3 shoved from the front, and a horde of snow monsters with clubs in their hands were already marching towards the unwanted visitors to their world. The battle started, where some clones wielded knives, others reacted to the enemy with mana charge shots. The group leader enjoyed things proceeding, where he himself was battling foes with his accursed sword. And just as he was thinking it would be nice to keep going just as vigorously as before, all of a sudden, the ground beneath him started shaking, where a humongous frozen hand burst forth out of the ice depths. At the same time, inside the tent, Blake's aide was apprehensive about the fellow, informing him that even their finest crew couldn't handle, to which the fellow responded by stating that he had confidence in the capability of this fellow, where previously he had been thinking that the least number of hunters the rescue team would have is C, but what this young guy was able to achieve during training actually excited imagination. Where his assistant was shocked when the boss told him that this young guy now became a B level. At the same time, all his copies also got much stronger, where although their capacities are inferior to the original, but in total, they still level B. Thus, Josh alone is superior in rank to their whole top team. Blake also reported that if the Fox Association warehouse hadn't had been robbed, then the young man's traits would have been far more. After which, the servant of the head of the association mentioned that, in that situation, not a single monster of the first rank of this world could stand in Josh's way. To this, Blake said mentioned that he warned the young man for the ice giant, with which he could most likely bypass, but in fact turned out to be much harder to go by unnoticed, and Josh was already literally face to face with that very same giant. Inspecting his incredibly huge opponent, the man realized that he was in serious danger and made up his mind to act for sure. The young man threw blood on the accursed sword, invoking the darkest powers in his assistance, and so, with all his force, he struck the enemy the strongest blow that he was capable of in the body of a clone. Where he was surprised was that after this, there was no longer a single scratch left on the ice giant. With huge efforts, Josh managed to emerge from the enemy's counterattack, which would leave him without one clone, and while repelling himself, the concepts of this man were that he could never be able to cause any harm to this opponent. And then, he witnessed how the other snow beasts suddenly started attacking this giant, but to him, these small animals also did not seem to be any danger, where the ice giant devourer easily killed one by one, right in front of the shocked Josh and his clones. Understanding that now their turn would come, and in order to make at least someone remain alive, the young man commanded the clones to scatter. The giant's blow was of monstrous power, and the clones only had the time to dash into the broken space in every direction. Remembering Blake's order, the young boy attempted to locate the exact position where his nucleus was from the ice giant. Discovering that it was not as hard, but a new question arose: how to reach there and destroy it. Finally, neither the blessed sword nor the mana-charged cartridges had any effect on this beast. As Josh observed this giant preparing to launch a fresh attack, he attempted to devise a fresh plan. The giant's attack became surprisingly powerful, and the leader, one of the members of the rescue party, commanded the clones to withdraw from the destroyed section. He absorbed the freezing blow for himself, believing that he could resist it with ease without being harmed, but one of his clones weakened and was unable to see how a huge ice fist fell on him. Witnessing one of his clones getting smashed, the young man cursed, thinking that the monster would kill someone who did not possess a teleportation scroll. And the moment he remembered this scroll, at exactly that moment in time, he charged towards the monster with all his might, and the ice giant was already lining up to swallow his next victim, not knowing that the eventual outcome of it all would be that clothes would stay in his stomach. Josh took advantage of this opportunity to get as close as possible to the body of number 5. The young man reached out to the body of number 5, and a second later it was swallowed down the giant's throat. The other clones simply watched what their commander was up to, where Josh, in the clone's body, emerged with power from the body of the giant and landed on the icy surface. He stood up, and mortal danger was already standing behind him. But looking at his enemy and sitting down on the ice, the young man smiled and inquired of him if the monster enjoyed what it had swallowed. And thus, having half of the teleportation scroll, he asked the monster if it knew what it was. But even though the ice giant knew, he sure didn't have time to know anything, let alone do anything, where in 1 second a teleportation portal opened right inside of him,